The stars looked different when you were dying. Captain Veltara pressed her thin fingers against the cracked viewing port of her ship and watched the distant suns flicker like dying candles. Her reflection stared back at her from the damaged glass, showing the elegant curves of her pale blue face and the large, dark eyes that marked her as one of the Zephyrian people. Those same eyes now held fear and desperation as she watched her crew slowly suffocate in the cold darkness of space. The research vessel Harmony's Light had been the pride of the Zephyrian exploration fleet when it launched 3 months ago. Its crystal hull sparkled like a jewel against the black void, and its bioorganic systems hummed with peaceful energy. The ship was designed for discovery and wonder, built by a species that had never known war or violence. Every curve of its structure spoke of grace and harmony, values that the Zephyrians held sacred above all else. Now that same beautiful ship was breaking apart around them. The hull groaned with each breath Veltara took, and she could hear the soft hiss of atmosphere bleeding into space through dozens of tiny cracks. The gravitational storm they had encountered near the edge of this system had torn through their delicate vessel like a wild beast through silk. Emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the organic walls, and the ship's living computer systems flickered weakly as they fought to keep everyone alive. Veltara turned away from the viewing port and walked carefully through the corridors of her dying ship. Her people moved with the natural grace of beings who had evolved on a world with gentle gravity and peaceful skies. They were tall and slender, with skin that shifted between pale blue and silver depending on the light. Their movements were like dancers, smooth and flowing, because their ancestors had never needed to fight or run from predators. In the main laboratory, she found her science officer Zindal hunched over his workstation. His forearms moved across the bioluminescent controls with practiced ease, but his antennae drooped with exhaustion. Like all Zephyrians, he was a peaceful soul who had dedicated his life to understanding the universe through careful study and observation. "Any luck with the distress beacon?" Veltara asked, though she already knew the answer from his posture. Zindal looked up at her with eyes that held barely controlled panic. "I have been broadcasting on all known frequencies for 6 hours, Captain. The signal should reach any civilized vessel within 50 light-years of our position. But this region of space is largely unexplored by the Council races." The Galactic Harmony Council was the organization that bound 37 peaceful species together in friendship and cooperation. For over 1,000 years, they had shared knowledge and resources across the galaxy, creating a golden age of discovery and understanding. War was unknown among the Council races. Violence was almost unthinkable, and every member species shared the same basic values of peace and harmony. But they were far from Council space now, deep in the unknown regions, where few civilized beings dared to travel. The Harmony's Light had been on a routine survey mission when the gravitational anomaly caught them. Now they were stranded in a system that appeared on no star charts, sending desperate signals into an empty void. "Keep broadcasting," Veltara told her science officer. "Someone will hear us. They have to." She moved through the ship, checking on her crew of 23 beings. In the medical bay, Dr. Quinara tended to the injured with the gentle touch that all Zephyrian healers possessed. Her patient was young Nixal, barely out of training, who had been caught near a hull breach when the gravitational storm hit. The doctor's healing songs filled the air with soft melodies that helped speed recovery, but even she could not heal the ship itself. "How are our people doing?" Veltara asked quietly. Dr. Quinara looked up from her patient with worried eyes. "The injured will recover if we can get them proper treatment soon, but Captain, our air recyclers are failing. We have perhaps 18 hours of breathable atmosphere remaining, maybe 20 if we reduce activity to minimal levels." 18 hours. Veltara felt her heart skip a beat at the news. The Zephyrians had 3 small hearts that pumped their silver blood through their graceful bodies, and right now all 3 were racing with fear. 18 hours to live unless help arrived from somewhere in the vast emptiness of space. She made her way to the bridge, where her pilot Kexon sat motionless. At his station, his hands rested on the bioorganic controls that had once responded to his thoughts like extensions of his own body. Now those same controls were dark and lifeless, unable to move their crippled ship even a single meter. "Any change in our situation?" she asked. Kexon shook his head slowly. "The main drive is completely dead, Captain. Even if we had full power, we could not break free from this system's gravitational field. We are trapped here until someone comes for us." Veltara settled into her command chair and looked out at the stars through the main viewing screen. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of their sensors, other ships moved through the darkness between worlds. But would any of them be willing to help a small research vessel from a species they had never met? The Council races were known for their compassion and willingness to aid those in need. If a Altarian merchant vessel or a Centaurian explorer happened to receive their signal, help would come without question. But what if their distress call was answered by something else entirely? Veltara had heard the stories, of course. Every spacer knew the tales of the regions beyond civilized space, where savage species were said to lurk in the darkness. Beings who had evolved not from gentle herbivores like the Council races, but from hunters and predators. Creatures who had learned to walk among the stars not through cooperation and wisdom, but through violence and conquest. The other races called them Deathworlders, beings from planets so harsh and dangerous that only the strongest and most ruthless could survive. Most Council scientists believed such creatures were impossible. How could a species based on violence and aggression ever develop the cooperation needed for space travel? It was far more likely that such worlds would destroy themselves long before achieving interstellar flight. But the stories persisted, whispered in the deep space trading posts and outer colony worlds. Tales of massive ships bristling with weapons, crewed by beings who could tear a Zephyrian apart with their bare hands. Monsters who saw other species not as friends to be cherished, but as prey to be hunted. Veltara shook her head to clear away such dark thoughts. Even if such creatures existed, surely they would not venture into this empty region of space. And even if they did, what were the chances they would hear the distress call of one small research vessel? The hours passed slowly as the Harmony's light continued its desperate broadcast. The crew worked together with the quiet efficiency that marked all Zephyrian endeavors, doing everything possible to extend their remaining time. They shut down non-essential systems, sealed off damaged sections, and gathered in the main laboratory to conserve heat and atmosphere. Veltara found herself thinking about her home world of Zephyr Prime, with its crystal cities and floating gardens. She thought about her family waiting for her return, and the research data they had gathered that would never reach the Council archives. Most of all, she thought about how peaceful and beautiful her life had been, and how cruel it seemed that it would end in this cold and empty place. Then Zindal's voice cut through her dark thoughts like a blade. "Captain, I am detecting something on the long-range sensors. A ship is approaching our position at high speed." Veltara rushed to the sensor station and looked at the readings with growing amazement. Whatever was coming toward them was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Harmony's light. It was moving faster than any Council vessel she had ever seen, and its energy signature was unlike anything in their databases. "Can you identify the ship type?" she asked. Zindal worked frantically at his controls, trying to make sense of the readings. "Negative, Captain. The configuration is completely unknown. But, Captain, the energy output suggests weapons systems far beyond anything the Council has ever developed." A chill ran through Veltara's body as she realized what they might have summoned with their desperate call for help. Their distress signal had reached someone, but it might not be the rescue they had hoped for. As the unknown ship drew closer, She could only pray that whoever answered their call would show mercy to a small crew of peaceful explorers who had never harmed anyone in their lives. Captain Jake Morrison stood 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed 220 pounds of solid muscle earned through years of military training and combat experience. His hands were scarred from countless battles. His face was marked by a jagged line across his left cheek from shrapnel, and his dark eyes held the steady gaze of a man who had seen too much death and destruction. He was everything the peaceful council races feared when they whispered stories about Deathworlders in the dark corners of space. The bridge of the UNS Defiance reflected the harsh reality of human warfare. Steel plates covered every surface. Weapon control stations lined the walls, and tactical displays showed firing solutions for dozens of different threat scenarios. The massive dreadnought stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull bristling with railgun turrets, missile pods, and energy weapon arrays that could reduce a small moon to rubble in minutes. Morrison studied the alien vessel on his main screen with the practiced eye of a veteran soldier. The ship was beautiful in a way that human vessels never were, all flowing curves and organic lines that seemed to grow rather than be built. It reminded him of a flower or maybe a piece of delicate artwork, completely unlike the brutal efficiency of human military design. "Report," he said in the clipped tones that marked him as a career military officer. Lieutenant Amy Carter turned from her communications station with a puzzled expression on her young face. She was 26 years old and had joined the fleet fresh from the Naval Academy on Mars, full of enthusiasm for humanity's expansion into the galaxy. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her blue eyes reflected the same determination that drove all human explorers into the dangerous unknown. "Sir, we're receiving what appears to be a distress signal on multiple frequencies. The computer has managed to translate most of it using the linguistic database from our previous alien contacts. They're requesting immediate assistance and claiming to be peaceful explorers in need of rescue." Morrison nodded slowly. The 7th Human Expeditionary Fleet had been conducting deep space patrols for 6 months, mapping systems and looking for potential threats to human colonies. They had encountered 3 alien species so far, and each first contact had been a delicate dance of diplomacy and mutual suspicion. Humans had learned the hard way that not every species in the galaxy was friendly. "Any response to our communications attempts?" he asked. "Negative, sir. They might not recognize our transmission protocols, or their communications array could be damaged." Commander Rick Barnes stepped forward from his position at the tactical station. He was a few years older than Morrison, with graying hair and the steady manner of a man who had served in every major human conflict of the past 2 decades. His hands rested casually near the weapon controls, a habit developed during years of fighting in the outer colonies where enemy ships could appear without warning. "Sir, I recommend we approach with caution. The vessel appears to be genuinely disabled, but we can't rule out the possibility of a trap. Some species might view a distress call as an effective way to lure unsuspecting ships into an ambush." Morrison considered the tactical situation. The alien ship was clearly dying, venting atmosphere and debris into space from multiple hull breaches. Its energy signature was fading rapidly, and their sensors detected no weapon systems or defensive capabilities. If this was a trap, it was an elaborate one that required the aliens to actually cripple their own vessel. "Bring us to within 5,000 meters and maintain battle stations," Morrison ordered. "Launch a reconnaissance drone for detailed scans, then prepare a rescue shuttle with full medical and engineering support." The next few minutes passed in tense silence as the massive human dreadnought maneuvered closer to the dying alien vessel. The contrast between the 2 ships was striking. Where the alien craft was elegant and organic, the Defiance was a brutal monument to human engineering and warfare. Every line of its hull spoke of violence and aggression, from the armored prow, designed for ramming attacks, to the weapon clusters that could deliver death across impossible distances. Dr. Lisa Hayes arrived on the bridge wearing the blue uniform of the Fleet Medical Corps. She was 32 years old with brown hair and intelligent green eyes that missed nothing. Her medical bag contained instruments designed to treat human injuries, but she had spent the last year studying alien biology in preparation for exactly this type of situation. "Sir, I'm ready to accompany the rescue team," she reported. "I've reviewed what little we know about alien physiology, but I'm afraid we'll be working mostly from guesswork until we can examine the casualties directly." Morrison studied the readings from their reconnaissance drone as it circled the alien vessel. The ship's internal atmosphere was failing rapidly, and they detected 23 life signs scattered throughout the hull. Whatever these beings were, they were dying quickly and needed immediate assistance. "Dr. Hayes, take a full medical team and all the portable life support equipment we can spare. Sergeant Bobby Chen will provide security with a squad of Marines, but keep your weapons concealed. We don't want to appear threatening during first contact." Hayes nodded and headed for the shuttle bay, followed by Chen and his Marines. The sergeant was a compact man with the quick movements of a natural fighter, his dark eyes constantly scanning for threats even in the safety of his own ship. His squad consisted of 6 Marines armed with pulse rifles and combat armor, enough firepower to handle most hostile situations they might encounter. The rescue shuttle Alpha launched from the Defiance's main bay and crossed the short distance to the alien vessel in less than 2 minutes. The shuttle itself was another example of human military design, built for speed and durability rather than comfort or elegance. Its hull was scarred from previous missions, and its weapon systems were kept ready for immediate use. "Approaching the alien ship now," reported pilot Tony Rodriguez over the communications link. He was a veteran of the colonial wars with steady hands and nerves of steel, exactly the kind of man you wanted flying a rescue mission into unknown territory. "I'm seeing massive hull damage and multiple atmosphere leaks. These people are in serious trouble." Morrison watched the rescue operation unfold on his main screen, knowing that the next few minutes would determine humanity's relationship with yet another alien species. The humans had learned from bitter experience that first impressions mattered enormously in diplomatic relations, and they could not afford to make enemies of every species they encountered. "Sir, we've managed to seal the worst of the hull breaches," Dr. Hayes reported from inside the alien ship. "Atmosphere is stabilizing, and we're beginning emergency repairs to their life support systems. But, Captain, you need to see this. These beings are unlike anything we've encountered before." The video feed from Hayes's helmet camera showed the interior of the alien vessel, and Morrison felt his breath catch in his throat. The ship was incredibly beautiful, with walls that seemed to be grown rather than built and soft lighting that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Everything spoke of a peaceful, artistic culture that had never known the harsh realities of warfare. But it was the aliens themselves that truly amazed him. They were tall and graceful, with pale blue skin that shimmered in the soft light. Their movements were like dancers, smooth and flowing, and their large dark eyes held an intelligence that was unmistakably peaceful. These were not warriors or conquerors, but explorers and scientists who had dedicated their lives to understanding the universe. "They're terrified of us, sir," Hayes continued. "Several of them fainted when we entered their ship, and the others are pressed against the far walls like they expect us to attack them at any moment." Morrison felt a cold realization settle in his stomach. Humans had always assumed they were fairly typical among spacefaring species, perhaps a bit more aggressive than some, but nothing truly unusual. The idea that their very appearance would inspire terror in other intelligent beings had never occurred to them. "Continue the rescue operation," he ordered. "Do everything possible to keep them alive and try to establish peaceful communications. And Doctor, be very careful how you approach them. We may be dealing with a species that has never encountered predators before." As the rescue continued, Morrison began to understand just how different humans were from the beings they were trying to save. These aliens had evolved from prey species on a peaceful world, while humans were the descendants of hunters who had fought their way to the top of Earth's food chain through millions of years of violence and struggle. The distress call that had seemed like a simple rescue mission was about to become humanity's introduction to a galaxy that saw them as monsters from their darkest nightmares. Dr. Lisa Hayes stood in the airlock of the alien vessel and tried to make herself appear as small and harmless as possible. At 5 feet 8 inches tall, she was actually shorter than most of the human crew, but compared to the delicate aliens, cowering before her, she felt like a giant. Her medical training had taught her to be gentle with patients, but nothing had prepared her for beings who seemed to view her very existence as a threat to their lives. The interior of the Zephyrian ship was the most beautiful thing Hayes had ever seen. The walls curved organically like the inside of a seashell, and soft bioluminescent panels provided warm light that pulsed gently with the rhythm of living systems. Everything was designed for comfort and harmony, from the flowing corridors to the elegant furniture that seemed to grow from the floor itself. It was clear that these beings had never known conflict or violence. Behind her, Sergeant Bobby Chen and his Marines tried to look non-threatening while still maintaining tactical awareness. Chen was a professional soldier who had fought in 3 different colonial wars, and his instincts screamed danger every time he entered an unknown environment. But the aliens before them were clearly no threat to anyone, huddled together like frightened children and chittering in their musical language. The Zephyrians themselves were even more fragile than their ship. They stood about 5 feet tall, with slender builds that spoke of low gravity and peaceful evolution. Their skin was pale blue with hints of silver, and it seemed almost translucent in the soft light. Large, dark eyes dominated their faces, eyes that were now wide with terror as they stared at the human rescue team. Several aliens had collapsed when the humans first entered their ship, overcome by fear and shock. Others pressed themselves against the walls as far from the humans as possible, their musical voices rising in what sounded like prayers or pleas for mercy. It was clear that they expected the worst from their unexpected rescuers. Captain Veltara forced herself to step forward, though every instinct told her to flee from these terrifying creatures. The humans were massive compared to her people, built like living weapons with broad shoulders and thick limbs that spoke of incredible strength. Their faces were flat and predatory, with forward-facing eyes that marked them as hunters. Most frightening of all, they moved with the confident grace of apex predators who had never known fear. "Please," she managed in halting standard Galactic, her voice shaking with terror. "We mean no harm. We are peaceful explorers. We have no weapons and offer no threat to your kind." Dr. Hayes slowly removed her helmet, revealing her human features and shoulder-length brown hair. She tried to smile in what she hoped was a reassuring manner, though she had no idea how these aliens would interpret human facial expressions. Her green eyes held nothing but compassion and concern, but she knew that the aliens might see something entirely different. "We received your distress call," Hayes said softly, speaking in the same standard Galactic that the alien captain had used. "We're here to help you. My name is Lisa, and I'm a doctor. Can you tell me if anyone is injured?" The medical examination that followed was a careful dance of fear and misunderstanding. Every time Hayes or her team tried to approach an injured Zephyrian, the alien would flinch away as if expecting to be struck. The humans found themselves moving with exaggerated slowness, speaking in whispers, and keeping their hands visible at all times to avoid triggering more panic. Hayes knelt beside a young Zephyrian who had been caught near a hull breach when the gravitational storm hit. The alien's left arm was clearly broken, and there were cuts across his pale blue skin from flying debris. But when she reached out to examine the injury, the being recoiled with a cry of terror that echoed through the ship. "It's okay," Hayes whispered, holding her hands up to show they were empty. "I just want to help. I'm a healer, like your own doctors." Dr. Quinara, the Zephyrian medical officer, stepped forward with visible effort. Her own fear was obvious. But her dedication to her patients overcame her terror of the humans. She spoke rapidly in her own language to the injured crew member, then turned to Hayes with eyes that held barely controlled panic. "He fears you will eat him," she said in broken Standard Galactic. "We have heard stories of Deathworld creatures who consume other sentient beings. Are you such monsters?" Hayes felt her heart break at the question. The idea that these gentle beings viewed humans as cannibalistic monsters was almost too painful to bear. She slowly reached into her medical bag and pulled out a protein bar, taking a small bite to show what humans actually ate. "We eat plants and processed nutrients," she explained gently. "We don't harm other intelligent beings. We came here because you called for help, and helping others is what we do." The language barrier made everything more difficult. Standard. Galactic was apparently a trade language used by the peaceful species, but it was clear that the Zephyrians were not fluent in it. Hayes found herself using simple words and hand gestures to communicate, trying to bridge the gap between two completely different ways of thinking. Medic Tony Rodriguez worked alongside Hayes with the infinite patience of a man who had treated casualties in dozens of war zones. He was a stocky man with gentle hands and a calm manner that helped put patients at ease, but even his softest movements seemed to terrify the aliens. When he tried to set up a portable medical scanner, 3 Zephyrians fainted at the sight of the unfamiliar human technology. "Doc, this isn't working," Rodriguez whispered. "Every time we try to help them, they think we're about to kill them. How are we supposed to provide medical care to patients who are afraid to let us touch them?" Hayes looked around at the terrified aliens and made a difficult decision. She slowly reached up and began removing her medical equipment, setting each piece on the floor where the aliens could see it. Then she sat down cross-legged, making herself smaller and less threatening. "I need your help," she said to Dr. Quinera. "You know your people's biology better than I do. If you can guide me, I can show you how to use some of our medical equipment to help the injured." It was a risky approach. Human medical technology was far more advanced than anything the Zephyrians possessed, but it was also designed for human physiology. Using it on alien patients would require careful adaptation and constant monitoring, but it was better than watching these gentle beings suffer while being too afraid to accept help. Dr. Quinara approached slowly, her 4 delicate hands shaking with fear as she examined the human medical scanner. Hayes guided her through the basic controls, explaining how to adjust the settings for Zephyrian biology. It was slow work, but gradually the alien doctor began to understand how the human technology could be adapted for her patients. The breakthrough came when they successfully treated the young Zephyrian's broken arm using a combination of human medical techniques and Zephyrian healing songs. The portable bone regenerator that Rodriguez provided worked far faster than anything in the alien's medical kit, and the patient's arm was fully healed within an hour. Word of the successful treatment spread quickly through the ship, and slowly the Zephyrians began to overcome their terror. They were still frightened of the humans, but they could no longer deny that these terrifying creatures were genuinely trying to help them. The concept of predators showing mercy and compassion was difficult for their prey species' minds to accept, but the evidence was right before their eyes. Captain Veltara found herself watching Dr. Hayes work with growing amazement. The human woman moved with incredible strength and speed, yet she handled the delicate alien medical equipment with the care of someone working with priceless artifacts. Her face showed genuine concern for each patient, and she worked tirelessly to ensure that every injured Zephyrian received the best possible care. "Why do you help us?" Veltara asked during a quiet moment. "Your kind are clearly powerful warriors who could take anything you wanted by force. Why show mercy to weak beings like us?" Hayes looked up from her patient with tired but determined eyes. "Because you needed help," she said simply. "When someone calls for rescue, you answer that call. That's what civilized beings do. The concept was revolutionary to the Zephyrian mind. In their experience, strength meant dominance and weakness meant submission. The idea that powerful beings would use their strength to protect the weak rather than exploit them challenged everything they thought they knew about the universe. As the hours passed, the humans continued their rescue efforts with quiet efficiency. They repaired hull breaches, restored life support systems, and treated the injured with skill and compassion. More importantly, they did all of this while asking for nothing in return except the chance to help fellow travelers in distress. By the time the emergency was over, the Zephyrians had begun to see their rescuers in a completely different light, though they still didn't fully understand what manner of beings had answered their desperate call for help. Admiral Susan Wright stood in the war room of the UNS Retribution and stared at the holographic display that showed everything humanity had learned about the galaxy in the past week. The massive carrier served as the flagship of the 7th Human Expeditionary Fleet, and its Strategic Command Center was designed to coordinate military operations across entire star systems. Banks of computers processed tactical data, communication arrays reached across impossible distances, and weapon control systems could direct the firepower of 50 warships with surgical precision. Wright herself was a veteran of humanity's expansion into space, a woman who had commanded fleets in 3 different wars and earned her position through decades of hard fighting. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her blue eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had made life and death decisions for thousands of people. At 52 years old, she was one of the youngest admirals in human history and, arguably, the most capable military commander alive. The holographic display showed the Zephyrian cultural database that Captain Veltara had shared with the human rescue team. What it revealed challenged everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. Page after page of data scrolled past, describing a galactic civilization built on principles of peace and cooperation that humans could barely comprehend. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Wright said to the assembled officers. "These beings consider Earth to be what they call a death world because our gravity is slightly higher than their home planet." Dr. Lisa Hayes nodded from her position at the briefing table. She had spent the last 3 days aboard the Zephyrian vessel, learning about their culture and biology while treating their injured crew members. Her medical report painted a picture of beings so fragile and peaceful that they seemed almost mythical by human standards. Their homeworld has 0.7 Earth gravity, Admiral. They classify anything above 0.8 as uninhabitable by civilized species. They also evolved from herbivorous prey animals, so the concept of predator evolution is completely foreign to their thinking. Commander Paul Davis, the fleet's intelligence officer, pulled up a new section of the alien database. He was a thin man with sharp features and an analytical mind that could process vast amounts of information with computer-like efficiency. His job was to understand potential threats to human colonies, but the Zephyrians presented no threat to anyone. It gets more interesting, Admiral. According to their historical records, humanity is the first predator species they've encountered. That achieved spaceflight. Most high-gravity worlds either destroy themselves through warfare before developing interstellar technology, or they never advance beyond primitive tribal societies. The implications were staggering. Humanity had always assumed they were relatively typical among spacefaring races, perhaps more militaristic than some, but nothing truly unusual. The discovery that they were considered terrifying monsters by an entire galactic civilization was both fascinating and deeply troubling. Wright studied the data on the Galactic Harmony Council, the organization that united 37 peaceful species in friendship and cooperation. For over 1,000 years, these races had shared knowledge and resources across the galaxy without a single recorded instance of warfare between member species. They had achieved everything humanity dreamed of through pure cooperation and mutual understanding. "What about their military capabilities?" Wright asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "They don't have any," Davis replied. The concept of organized violence between intelligent species is so foreign to them that they don't even have words for military ranks or weapons of war. Their ships are designed for exploration and trade, with no defensive systems beyond basics. Meteor deflectors. Dr. Hayes pulled up medical scans of the Zephyrian crew members. Physically, they're incredibly fragile by our standards. Their bones are hollow like bird bones to compensate for their low-gravity evolution. A human child could probably overpower an adult Zephyrian without trying. They've never needed to be strong or fast because their world never had large predators. Cultural analysis was even more revealing. The Zephyrians and their council allies had built their entire civilization around principles that humans found admirable but impractical. They shared resources freely, resolved conflicts through discussion and compromise, and viewed violence as a sign of mental illness rather than a tool of policy. They actually have mental health facilities for treating what they call aggressive impulse disorder, Hayes continued. Any individual who shows signs of wanting to harm others is immediately given therapy and medication. They can't conceive of a society where violence is normal or necessary. Wright leaned back in her chair and tried to process the full implications of what they had learned. Humanity's entire military structure, their weapons technology, their aggressive expansion into space, all of it marked them as monsters by galactic standards. They were the bogeymen that peaceful species told scary stories about in the dark. So we're the galaxy's nightmare, she said finally. The savage Deathworlders that civilized beings fear will come out of the void to destroy everything they've built. That appears to be accurate, Admiral, Davis confirmed. But there's something else you need to know. The rescue operation has changed how they view us completely. Wright raised an eyebrow. Explain. Hayes activated another display, this one, showing communication logs between the Zephyrian ship and their home government. Captain Veltara has been in constant contact with her superiors, reporting everything that happened during the rescue. The Galactic Harmony Council is calling an emergency session to discuss first contact with humanity. The messages were fascinating to read. The Zephyrians struggled to explain to their own government how the terrifying Deathworlders had used their frightening capabilities not for conquest or destruction, but for rescue and healing. The concept was so foreign to their understanding that many council members initially refused to believe the reports. They can't understand why we helped them, Hayes explained. In their experience, strength equals dominance and weakness equals victimization. The idea that a powerful species would use their abilities to protect weaker beings instead of exploiting them is revolutionary to their way of thinking. Commander Rick Barnes, who had been quietly studying the tactical implications, spoke up for the first time. Admiral, this could be the opportunity we've been looking for. Human colonies are scattered across dozens of systems with minimal defense fleets. If we could establish friendly relations with this council, it might provide the political stability we need for long-term expansion. Wright nodded thoughtfully. Humanity's rapid expansion into space had been driven by necessity rather than choice. Earth was overcrowded, resources were becoming scarce, and political tensions were rising between the major powers. The discovery of faster-than-light travel had offered a solution, but it had also created new problems as human colonies found themselves isolated and vulnerable in a potentially hostile galaxy. "What are they proposing?" Wright asked. Davis pulled up the latest message from the council chambers. "They want to meet with our representatives. Captain Veltara has vouched for our peaceful intentions, but the council needs to see for themselves what kind of beings we are. They're offering to send a diplomatic vessel to neutral space for formal first contact." The offer was unprecedented. No species had ever been invited to meet with the Galactic Harmony Council without first proving their peaceful nature through decades of observation. The fact that humanity was being fast-tracked for diplomatic contact spoke to how profoundly the rescue operation had affected Zephyrian thinking. "There's one more thing," Hayes added. Captain Veltara asked me a question that I think goes to the heart of this whole situation. She wanted to know why humans would risk their lives to save strangers who could offer them nothing in return. I told her it was because that's what civilized beings do. Wright felt a smile tug at the corner of her mouth. And how did she respond to that? She said it was the most revolutionary concept she had ever heard. The idea that civilization might be measured by compassion rather than technological advancement has apparently sparked a philosophical debate throughout the council worlds. The admiral stood and walked to the viewing port, looking out at the stars that held so many mysteries and possibilities. Humanity had stumbled into their role as the galaxy's protectors entirely by accident, simply by doing what came naturally when someone called for help. The rescue of one small research vessel had revealed the existence of an entire galactic civilization that desperately needed exactly what humanity could provide. Draft a response to the Council, Wright ordered. Tell them we accept their invitation for diplomatic contact, and get me a full analysis of what this could mean for human expansion. If we're going to be the galaxy's guardians, we need to understand exactly what that responsibility entails. As her officers scattered to carry out their orders, Wright remained at the viewing port, contemplating a future where humanity's greatest strength might not be their weapons or their aggression, but their willingness to answer a call for help from anyone who needed it regardless of the cost to themselves. 6 months had passed since the rescue of the Harmony's Light, and Captain Jake Morrison found himself standing in the observation deck of a Zephyrian diplomatic vessel as it approached the crystal spires of Zephyr Prime. The ship was a work of art, all flowing curves and bioluminescent panels that pulsed with gentle light. It was also completely unarmed, lacking even the basic defensive systems that every human vessel carried as standard equipment. Morrison still wore his military uniform with its battle ribbons and combat decorations, though he had left his sidearm aboard the UNS Defiance. Even without weapons, his presence was intimidating to the Zephyrian crew who moved through their ship like graceful dancers. At 6 feet 4 inches and 220 pounds of solid muscle, he represented everything their species had learned to fear during millions of years of evolution as prey animals. But the fear was different now, tempered by respect and something that might have been hope. The Zephyrians still flinched when he moved too quickly or spoke too loudly, but they no longer cowered in terror at his approach. Captain Veltara had spent the entire journey explaining human customs and behavior to her crew, helping them understand that these terrifying predators were not the monsters from their ancient nightmares. Ambassador Kevin Murphy stood beside Morrison, watching the magnificent crystal cities of Zephyr Prime grow larger on the viewing screen. Murphy was a career diplomat who had negotiated treaties on a dozen different worlds, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this moment. He was about to become humanity's first representative to a galactic civilization that had existed for over 1,000 years. Hard to believe that 6 months ago they thought we were going to eat them, Murphy said quietly, his voice carrying a mixture of amusement and wonder. Morrison nodded, remembering the terror in the aliens' eyes when his rescue team had first boarded their dying ship. Can you blame them for being afraid? Look at us from their perspective. We're twice their size, we evolved from hunters, and we come from a world they consider barely habitable. The transformation in human-alien relations had been nothing short of miraculous. Word of the rescue had spread throughout the galactic. Harmony Council, faster than light-speed communications, carried by traders and explorers who could barely believe what they were hearing. The dreaded Deathworlders, the savage monsters from the dark regions of space, had risked their lives to save a crew of peaceful researchers who could offer them nothing in return. Ambassador Murphy carried with him the formal documents that would make humanity the 38th member of the Galactic Harmony Council, but the real significance went far beyond paperwork and ceremonies. For the first time in galactic history, a predator species was being invited not as conquerors or overlords, but as protectors of the peace that the Council races had built over centuries of cooperation. Captain Veltara approached them with the careful grace that marked all Zephyrian movement. Her pale blue skin shimmered with patterns that Morrison had learned indicated emotional states, and right now those patterns showed excitement mixed with lingering nervousness. She had become humanity's strongest advocate among her own people. But old fears died hard. Ambassador Murphy, Captain Morrison, we will be docking at the council chambers within the hour, she said in her musical voice. I must warn you that many of the council members have never seen a Deathworlder before. Your appearance may cause some distress among the more sensitive species. Murphy smiled reassuringly. We understand, Captain. We'll do our best to appear as non-threatening as possible. The irony was not lost on Morrison that humanity's greatest diplomatic challenge was convincing other species that they were not monsters. Every aspect of human evolution screamed danger to the peaceful council races. Their forward-facing eyes marked them as hunters, their muscular build spoke of violence and aggression, and their technological focus on weapons and warfare confirmed every nightmare the galaxy's herbivores had ever imagined. But the rescue of the Harmony's light had changed everything. The same characteristics that made humans terrifying also made them uniquely suited to protect the fragile peace that the Council had built. Their military technology could defend against threats that the peaceful species could not even imagine, and their willingness to risk their lives for strangers proved that their predator instincts could be channeled toward protection rather than conquest. The docking procedure at Zephyr Prime was unlike anything Morrison had ever experienced. The space station was a massive crystal structure that grew organically from the planet's surface, reaching into orbit like a living tower. Ships didn't dock so much as merge with the station, their hulls becoming part of the overall structure, through some biological process that human science was only beginning to understand. As they made their way through the station's corridors, Morrison was amazed by the diversity of species that called the council home. Tall, willowy beings with translucent skin floated past on gossamer wings, while small, furry creatures scurried along the walls with the quick movements of prey animals. All of them shared the same basic characteristics that marked the council: races. They were peaceful, fragile, and utterly without any capacity for organized violence. The council chambers themselves were a marvel of cooperative engineering, designed to accommodate dozens of different species with wildly varying environmental needs. The central chamber was filled with a breathable atmosphere that worked for most air-breathing species, while specialized alcoves provided the specific conditions needed by more exotic members. Morrison and Murphy took their places in the section, reserved for honored guests, trying to ignore the stares and whispers that followed their every movement. Even after 6 months of diplomatic preparation, their presence caused a visible stir among the assembled delegates. Several of the smaller species had moved to the far side of the chamber, while others watched the humans with the fascination of beings observing dangerous predators in a zoo. Chancellor Miratel of the Altarian Republic called the session to order with a voice like singing crystal. She was one of the few council members who had met humans before, having participated in the initial diplomatic exchanges following the rescue. Her species were tall and elegant, with silver skin and large eyes that reflected their evolution, on a world of perpetual twilight. Distinguished members of the council, she began, we gather today to welcome a new member to our fellowship. For the first time in our 1,000-year history, we extend an invitation to a species that evolved not from the gentle herbivores of peaceful worlds, but from the apex predators of a death world. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft hum of life support systems and the nervous chittering of some of the smaller species. Morrison could feel the weight of hundreds of alien eyes upon him, studying every detail of his appearance and trying to reconcile his terrifying presence with the stories they had heard about human compassion. But these beings, these humans, have shown us something we had thought impossible, the Chancellor continued. They have proven that strength need not lead to domination, that the weapons of war can be turned to the tools of peace, and that the instincts of the hunter can serve to protect rather than destroy. Murphy rose to address the assembly, his words carefully chosen to convey humanity's commitment to the Council's principles. "We come not as conquerors, but as guardians," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "We offer our strength to protect the peace you have built, our weapons to defend against those who would destroy it, and our lives to ensure that the galaxy remains a place where knowledge and cooperation can flourish." The vote was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, a species born of violence and struggle was welcomed into the fellowship of peaceful races, not in spite of their nature, but because of it. The galaxy's gentle species had finally found protectors worthy of their trust, beings strong enough to defend their civilization and compassionate enough to preserve its values. Captain Veltara watched the ceremony with eyes that sparkled with tears of joy. Her desperate distress call had been answered by the very monsters her people feared most, only to discover that sometimes the universe sends exactly what you need, even when it comes in a form you never expected. The Deathworlders had arrived, not as the destroyers of peace but as its guardians, and the galaxy would never be the same.